Hello, good afternoon, and warm welcome to all. I am Radil Mishra from the corporate communication team, and on behalf of K Ratings, welcome you to our today's discussion on NBFCs. Credit costs likely to remain elevated due to COVID-2. We sincerely appreciate your time in joining us for this webinar. Our esteemed panel speakers for today are Mr. Umesh Revankar, MD and CEO Shriram Transport Finance Company Limited, would be joining us in some time. Mr. Uday Kumar, MD and CEO Credit Access Grameen Limited. Mr. D.S. Tripathi, MD and CEO Aadhar Housing Finance Limited. And Mr. Madan Sabnavi, Chief Economist and Senior Director at K Ratings. The session will be moderated by Mr. Sachin Gupta, Chief Rating Officer at K Ratings. Dear sirs, thank you and welcome to all. We'll commence the session with a small presentation by Janet Thomas, who's a Senior Manager at K Ratings, on how credit cost is likely to remain elevated due to COVID-2. This will be followed by a panel discussion moderated by Mr. Sachin, and we'll be having a Q&A session with the audience at the end of the discussion. In case of any queries, you are please requested to key in your respective panel. Now may I invite Janet to begin a presentation. Janet, I'll just unmute you. You can please go ahead with that. Yes, Janet, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you, Mridul. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we are going to take a brief look at the asset quality performance of each of the subsegments that NBFCs deal with. We have tried to look at the data set of the specific asset classes of the NBFCs and have considered asset specialized NBFCs to form our opinions. Before we deep dive, just a quick glance at the broader picture for the economy as well as the NBFC sector. As we can see from the slide here, we expect GDP growth at 10.2% over the next 1 year, a much better picture when we compare the 8% degrowth in FY21. Yes, there has been a jolt to economic revival with the current resurgence of the COVID-19 virus. Data does suggest that fresh caseloads have increased sharply as compared to last year. But this time around, there are few positives, like the lockdown is region specific and not centralized yet. Also, economic activity in the infrastructure, the construction, mining sector, etc., has not been impacted. Now, coming to the NBFC sector. Well, this segment has been under pressure since 2016 with challenges such as demonetization, GST, liquidity stress, and now the pandemic. One good thing to come out of all of this is that post September 2018, NBFCs strengthened their balance sheet and pumped up their liquidity levels. This has more or less enabled them to bear the pressure of the pandemic, especially in the first half of FY21. To give you an overall trend, post September 20, disbursements had picked up, and for most of the NBFCs, collections were inching closer to pre-COVID levels. Of course, with the current uncertainty, we do expect some sectors to be impacted less, like the retail secured lending business, and some which will be impacted more, especially on the retail unsecured lending side, which brings us to the microfinance sector. Mridul, can you please change the slide? To be a little clear, gross stage 3 assets under Ind AS are the non-performing assets for which the earlier IAS 39 considered impairment allowances. On the left chart, the blue line show gross stage 3 ratio and the gray line show credit cost ratio. On the right side, the blue line show provisioning coverage ratio, which is the coverage ratio for stage 3, and the gray line depicts assets under management, which is our AUM growth. So the broad trend for these charts will flow across every slide. Now, the MFI sector has seen an overall deterioration in asset quality. The impact was higher on MFIs operating in specific geographies like Assam, West Bengal, Punjab, Maharashtra, Orissa, which were either affected by socio-political issues or natural calamities like floods, or where borrowers were more severely impacted because of COVID. Overall, we expect credit costs to go up significantly in FY21. The larger MFIs have already made significant provisions and are carrying about roughly 3 to 5% provisions on the outstanding portfolio. For FY22, the segment will be impacted both by this new wave of the COVID virus and also restrictions in movement or lockdown being imposed by various states. But the impact on credit cost will be cushioned by the growth in AUM, which we believe will be higher in FY22. Next slide, please. Moving on to our next highly impacted segment, the small ticket SME financing. The ticket sizes here are of less than rupees 10 lakh, and loans generally have a lower loan to value ratio, a lower installment to income ratio. Here too, we have seen enormous stress during the lockdown period. Collections were as low as about 30-40% during April 2020. So this is more or less what we expected, since the borrowers are in the unorganized MSME segment, which was quite impacted. Another thing to be noted here is that AUM growth rates have been significantly higher during FY19 and FY20, which points out that there is limited seasoning in the sector. Now add the second wave uncertainty to the mix, and we have the perfect recipe for a spike in gross stage 3 ratio here. Subsequently, we will see additional provisioning, which will bump up the credit cost both in FY21 and FY22. Now, bucking the increasing credit cost trend here is our next sub-segment. Next slide, please. Commercial vehicle financing. So for CV, the data that we have seen here, or the data that we see here, is a cumulative data, both for new as well as used CV. As we all know, the economy slowdown in FY19 had led to a considerable slowdown in CV demand, which saw the sector being under stress. Vehicle operators had been impacted, plus the sector was also reeling under BS6 and axle load norms and such issues. This had caused a hike in gross stage 3 ratio, or our gross non-performing assets in the sector, as can be seen from the chart for FY20. But post September 20, once economy opened up, CV demand saw sequential improvement. Agricultural output was better, which translated into increased transportation of agri and agri-related goods. Sectors such as construction and mining were seeing sustained demand, plus the added benefit of moratorium to borrowers. So overall improvement was seen across both new and used CV. Broadly, we see this improvement to be translated into better numbers for FY21. But during April, we note that truck rentals and freight utilization has come down. Post-COVID-19 uncertainties have gone up. Largely, we have observed that the sector moves in tandem with the performance of the economy, and uncertainties about the economy have certainly increased. So gross stage 3 ratio for FY22 will go up from FY21. We also expect collections to be lower during the affected months. We now come to one of the most resilient of the asset class. Next slide, please. Housing finance. So here we have taken 6 large care-rated housing finance companies, for which the largest asset class is prime housing loans, which constitutes roughly about 70% of the overall loan book. 20% belongs to LAP and 10% goes to developer finance. Now, these housing finance companies have shown strong resilience during last year. So if you look at the blue line on the left chart, you would see that gross stage 3 ratio has deteriorated to about 2.3% at the end of FY20. However, we should note that most of the deterioration has come from loan against property, that is our LAP, and developer finance segment for these HFCs. The gross non-performing or the gross stage 3 ratio numbers for prime home loan segment would be roughly around 1% and has seen only marginal deterioration till date. This can be explained by the secured nature of the lending business. Overall underwriting standards are good, and predominantly the customer base is a salaried customer base, which is higher for prime home loan segment. Now, from the data that we have observed till December 2020 suggests that gross stage 3 ratio has largely remained stable because of Supreme Court dispensation, and is expected to deteriorate marginally by the end of FY21 when dispensation goes away. Now, if you look at the gray line on the chart on the left side, it shows that credit costs for HFCs have increased sharply from 0.3% to 1% in FY20. So some part of this was due to apportioning of extraordinary income towards provisioning and COVID-related provisions. In our view, a large part of the provisioning has already been done for some larger HFCs. So the incremental provisioning required would be lower, which explains the downward trend that you can see on the chart. All in all, housing finance companies with higher composition of self-employed borrowers or those having higher exposure to LAP and construction finance are expected to be impacted. Now, against the trend observed in prime housing, subprime housing lending has shown relatively higher delinquencies, which takes us to the next slide. Affordable housing. So as compared to the prime lending segment, affordable housing has relatively weaker borrowers, which can be seen from their higher gross stage 3 ratios. Now we can pin this down to few reasons. First-time borrowers are about 60% in affordable housing versus 45% in the larger than 15 lakh ticket size. About 15% of the customers are new to credit in affordable housing versus 6% for prime lending. Also, non-salaried class is a larger portion in affordable housing, almost roughly half of the loan book, but is lesser for prime lending. Now, one more interesting thing to be noted here is that this sector has had an accelerated growth, about 40% CAGR in the last few years, which also brings us to the point of or the issue of limited seasoning. So together, we expect all these factors to play out in FY21 and gross stage 3 ratio to go up. For FY22, we expect the current COVID wave to put some pressure on the self-employed segment, which will hike up the gross stage 3 ratio further. We do see some support for this sector in the form of access to SARFAESI Act for loans higher than 1 lakh ticket size. These HFCs, these affordable HFCs also have some minimal exposure to LAP or developer finance. Also, the capital levels in this segment are substantially higher, even to the extent of about 40-50% for some of the affordable HFCs. So moving on to the asset class, which has seen the least impact of COVID crisis. Next slide, please, Mridul. Gold financing. Now, as expected, asset quality remains strong in the gold loan segment, which could be attributed to multiple factors, liquid nature of assets, shorter tenure of gold loans, and periodic auctions. Now, as seen from the blue line on the left chart, asset quality remains stable during FY21 and FY22. We expect it to remain stable because any increase in gross stage 3 assets in that we foresee for the non-gold segment will be offset by the growth in gold loan segment during the year. Now, as seen from the gray line on the left chart, credit costs are roughly expected to increase by about 10 basis points in FY21, mainly due to the increased provisioning of the non-gold segment. Next slide, please. Now, this is a comparative chart that we have provided here for credit costs across all these subsectors, which will help us to understand how credit costs have been moving across all these asset classes. And as we can see here, that MFIs have had the most adverse impact, whereas housing loan and gold loans are largely shielded. Next slide, please. In a nutshell, we expect that MFIs and small ticket SME financing will see spike in credit costs. CV may see some impact in FY22. We do also expect that a moderate impact will be seen for affordable HFCs also. However, prime housing and gold loans will remain relatively safer asset classes. In closing, I'd like to mention that our analysis is based on expectations that lockdowns will start easing from end May, and estimates will have to be revised if the second wave of COVID is more prolonged or the severity of the situation increases. Also, we have not considered any form of support from the government or the regulator in our current analysis. Thank you all. Now, I'd like to hand the session back to Mridul.
Thank you, Janet. Now, may I invite Mr. Sachin to take the discussion forward. Mr. Sachin Gupta is the Chief Rating Officer at CARE Ratings. He has a total experience of 21 years in the leadership position across credit ratings business, financial sector ratings, infra ratings, corporate ratings, business development strategy, and rating committees. Prior to this, Sachin was working with CRISIL as Senior Director and managed the corporate and infrastructure. Over to you, sir. Sir, you're on mute, sir.
Yeah. I just, can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great, perfect. Thanks, my co-panelists for joining us today, and also thanks to our audience. I understand we have over 500 people who are attending this, so very relevant topic, and I'm happy that we are able to kind of engage the market in this conversation. So, Mridul, if you can put the slides on, I will just do a quick introduction of the speakers, and then we can get into the Q&A. Okay, great. So we have with us, so we have one panelist, Mr. Umesh Trivankar, who had joined and then he kind of got logged off. So some technology issue, so he may be joining us very shortly. So I will introduce him when he joins us. I start with Mr. Dev Shankar Tripathi, who's the MD and CEO of Aadhar Housing Finance Limited. He has over 38 years of vast experience in banking, and he's worked as a GM at Union Bank and President and COO at DHFL. And he holds a bachelor and master's degree in science from Lucknow University, and he's also got is an associate of the Indian Institute of Bankers. Mr. Tripathi, a very warm welcome to you, sir, for joining this panel.
Thank you, Sachin. Thank you.
Next, we have with us Mr. Uday Kumar. Can you please change the slide? Okay. Thank you. So, Mr. Uday Kumar is the MD and CEO of Credit Access Grameen Limited. He joined CA Grameen in 2010 and has been the main architect in the growth of the company, its listing, and the recent QIP. He served as the head commercial and banking operations in Barclays, and prior to that, he was in ICICI Bank for 11 years in the areas of credit, operations, agribusiness, and rural banking. He also served as at Corporation Bank for a period of over 10 years at the start of his career. He holds a bachelor's degree in commerce from the University of Mysore and a master's degree in commerce from Karnataka University, Dharwad. He's also a certified associate from Indian Institute of Bankers, and he holds a diploma from Vanderbilt. A very warm welcome, Mr. Uday Kumar. Glad to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Prasad, to be here.
We have with us Mr. Madan Sabnavis. He is the Chief Economist and Senior Director at CARE Ratings Limited. He's a postgraduate in economics from Delhi School of Economics, and he graduated from St. Stephen's in economics with honors. He's been a corporate economist since 1987 and has worked in the fields of development banking, commercial banking, engineering, and commodity markets before joining CARE Ratings. And he has, apart from economics, his interests include human behavior, politics, and social systems. Very warm welcome, Madan. Can you hear us, Madan? I think you are on mute. Okay, perfect. I can't hear you, Madan. Maybe you are on mute. I can't hear you, Madan. Are you on mute? Mridul, can you please help Madan? I can't hear him. He's trying to speak.
He's unmute, sir, but we are not able to hear him. Okay, so maybe Madan, you will have to figure out maybe something wrong with your.
Madan, you have to put earphone, or what is that?
No, it's a GoToMeeting has sometimes problem.
Okay, so while I think let's not keep everyone holding up. Madan will kind of resolve it and get back. Madan, can you hear us now? Okay. So anyway, so let's start. My first question I like to put to Mr. Uday Kumar. Sir, there was a recent MFIN report, in March 21, wherein we got a sense that the disbursements and collection efficiency have regained post the Q2 FY21, and it was actually expected to reach the pre-COVID levels during the last quarter of FY21. And now with the second wave, how do you think the impact, how adverse could be the impact, and what's your sense if you were to give a, for the industry for 21-22, how do you think the growth and the asset quality will be impacted? Over to you, sir.
Sachin, I agree that the Q3 and Q4, the industry disbursement come back to the pre-COVID level. But we need to take that with a pinch of salt, because that is after 2 quarters of not dispersing anything or very little dispersed from anybody. So if you see on a entire year basis, is actually much lesser. But still, the level of disbursement was increased in both Q3 and Q4, which is majority is for the customer who are completing the cycle. Renewals are more for the industry. Maybe new customer acquisition is quite low. That is what my expectation for the entire year. Maybe very single-digit growth in the customer, whereas maybe close to 10-12% growth in the industry. So may not be more than that. That is what my expectation. But yeah, that is a impacted year, which is good. But in the meantime, based on this COVID-2, which is currently we are all witnessing, while it is very, very important and very a bit of devastating in some places, but only the good thing what I can always think is the industry has learned for last 1 year how to navigate this kind of situation. Industry also learned how to navigate with the intermittent lockdown or a full lockdown, that kind of situation. So industry also managed, the employees have managed to ensure the business environment, and again able to come back. Similarly, customers also able to come back. So, this industry has been there for last 2 decades, and we have seen many crises. It can be demonetization, it could be Andhra episode in 2010, and again COVID. So I am talking about big black swan events, and industry is able to come back strongly every time. So whether it is customer or it is MFI, both are able to come back strongly despite this kind of severe impact, because of the strong resiliency behavior of the rural customer, particularly low-income households. While they are poor, but they are very resilient and very strong commitment they have always. So that is what we always witness. My estimation of credit cost is not equivalent to last year. It will be lesser because of the experience what we have. 2, we don't see the entire year is not, last year almost 6 months lost. We don't see that 6 months losing. 3, many states have made MFI as a kind of essential. They allowed MFI while lockdown. For example, Karnataka lockdown is there, Maharashtra lockdown is there, but microfinance are allowed to open official. The government allowed, because that means government recognized the importance of microfinance, which is very important for the state and the economy. That was not there at that time last year when the lockdown happened. So that advantage is there. So with all these things in place, and MFI also as a institutions also able to come back, despite any incidences in the last 2 decades, MFI as an industry also able to come back strongly. They are not defaulted, or they are not able to. Nobody closed down. There are 1 or 2 recent incidents which are nothing to do with COVID, but able to come back normally. So my estimation would be lesser than what was last year,
right?
Because of the experience what we have in
hand. Got it. Thank you, Mr. Kumar. Madan, can you hear us, and more importantly, can we hear you? No, I can't hear you. There's some problem with the
speaker, I think. The speaker.
Yeah, maybe the microphone. So anyway, so I'll get in Mr. Devshankar Tripathi here.
Audio I am able to, video I am not able to. They say open system preference.
Is that Mr. Revankar or is it Mr. Tripathi?
Yeah, Mr. Umesh has joined.
Okay. Sir, maybe you can, there is an icon which you can use to kind of turn the video on. That will kind of allow us to see you.
Yeah, I'm trying. There's
Okay.
some issue. Yeah.
So I'll ask my team to kind of help you. Maybe you can put it on mute while that is resolved. In the meanwhile, I'll pose a question to Mr. Tripathi. Mr. Tripathi, you know, you manage the affordable housing finance company Aadhar. The question I had was that, you know, while when we were looking at the beginning of the year, there was quite a bit of negativity around the real estate sector per se, that, you know, that will be impacted. People will not be really committing huge money to buy new homes or second homes and all that. But it surprised us how real estate sector per se and overall, I'm not necessarily talking about affordable housing, but I'm saying in general, it kind of surprised us that the numbers were actually better than what a lot of people were fearing. So what is your sense in the current year? You know, while financing is one aspect, but since you cater to the affordable housing, how do you think that the growth will happen in the base real estate market? Any sense on that? Because I'm sure you're keeping a close watch on that.
Sachin, you have rightly said last year, actually on 24th March, the nationwide lockdown was imposed. It was but natural. Even those who were thinking to buy a house, they wanted to keep their money preserved because not knowing how long the lockdown will go. Pandemic was a new phenomena for the country and everybody was in a panic situation. That's why everybody stopped and nobody was able to move out also. There and migrant labor, they moved out of the villages. So a lot of activities were standing still. But when in the May 2020, the unlocking started, the activity started. Why this rebound took place so fast? One, in the affordable, low income affordable, I tell you, because low income affordable is predominantly dominated by the self construction of the houses. The people who were already constructing their houses and applied loan in the month of March or prior to that, they were just waiting when the lockdown is opened and they should start their construction before the rainy season. But it could not happen before rainy season, before June. But subsequently, when they got opportunity, they started taking a very loan. The builders also, the government of India created a lot of good environment during that point of time. One most important was the RBI and government of India joint action with the huge liquidity, huge liquidity in the system, moratorium, all those various measures which taken by the government of India, and thereafter the industry body, the support given by the government to the migrant labor, they started coming back. All those measures, if you see, the affordable housing and other housing, they started to just coming back from June 2020, and by October, November, situation was almost 90% normal pre-pandemic level. And as we move to the Q4, that is Q1 of the current and calendar year or Q4 of the last financial year, the activity was at a very hyper scale. You would talk to any mainstream housing finance company, the affordable housing finance company focusing more in 15 lakh, 35 lakh rupees loan, or the low income affordable housing finance company like ours, all have seen the huge traction between January to March 2021. So you have rightly said, though growth could take place only in 7-8 months because 3-4 months were almost disaster, but it was a quite good growth, and I think 8-9% numbers overall growth will come. Number are yet to be out, but the indications are there. The growth would have been almost flat or equal to what we had seen in 1920. For my company, I can say it is slightly better than that. Now, coming your very important question, what will happen this year? We were expecting that the follow-on growth of the March, which was in a very, very fast trajectory, even the April, May, June, which used to be the very low fear for all activities, all companies were expecting, including the builder, that April, May, March will also see the good traction, not like January, February, March, but almost 75% of that. But unfortunately, the COVID wave 2, which is more fearful, which is more creating the panic among everyone, it is now putting everybody on hold. Though lockdown across the country was yet not imposed, couple of locations were imposed, like MP, Delhi was imposed, Maharashtra was partially imposed, Maharashtra, some locations are still open, they are allowing NBFC to work, Karnataka is imposed now. Now, of course, lockdown is getting widespread, but even though lockdown was not that much, as it was in April and May last year, the activities are completely almost standstill. It looks the economy is moving. But if I talk to the housing finance company, you ask anyone, their disbursement may be hardly 10-15% of what they have done in March or February. April is completely washed out. That is on the disbursement side. But it is not that the situation will remain like this only. We expect that after May, the situation may slightly calm down. And if like last year, the June, they start opening up the economy and the COVID situation becomes at a very low level, vaccination happens fast, then probably from June onward, we will see traction will start. We all hope that 21-22 will be much better, at least 10% growth over 2022, 2021. But again, this year, the growth will be seen only in 9 months, not in first 3 months. But growth will definitely happen. There was a stamp duty reduction by the various government given the last till March 2021. Even the stamp duty is not given, the growth will happen because people want to buy a house. After COVID, people have realized to have a bigger house. If somebody is in one small room, they want to have slightly bigger 2 rooms. So whatever their affordability is there, people are very keen, and the traction is also happening in the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 city in a much bigger way. So I am still very, I can say optimistically cautious that growth from the last year, it will happen slightly more, provided the lockdown position eases out after 20th May or 25th end of May, and the pandemic situation also subsides.
Very well said, sir. Very well. I think I like the candidness with you shared that in the month of April, it's kind of a washout. I think it resonates with what we are seeing. I mean, all around us. So good to get that clarity. Madan, I don't know if technology issues are managed now. Madan, are you there now?
Can you hear me now, Sachin, or no?
Yes. We were
we
waiting
can
to
hear
hear your voice. And Mr. Revankar, sir, I understand there is some issue on the video with you, but can you hear us, and maybe we can hear your voice as well?
I can hear you as well.
Perfect,
was hearing, but the video
no,
is the problem.
Perfect, sir. You have a resounding voice, so I don't think there is a challenge. Even though your video is not there, you are very loud and clear, so that's good. So before I get Mr. Revankar onto a question, I would just, I ideally wanted to ask that question, pose that question to Madan right at the beginning. To give us a sense of the overall economy, because things have really changed in the last 30-40 days, across the country. We were kind of pretty much thinking that we have overcome it, and there were many statements being made, etc. But now we find ourselves pretty much once again back to the square one. So Madan, over to you. Just give us a flavor of how do you see overall economy panning out in the next 12 months or so.
Before this financial year began, we actually had an estimate that GDP growth will be in a region of around 11 to 11.2%. But I think that the problems really started once we had the announcement of a lockdown in Maharashtra. It was very much concentrated at that point of time in Maharashtra, and maybe a few centers in places like Delhi, Bangalore, Indore. They had actually announced localized lockdowns. At that particular point of time, that would be probably in the beginning of April, we had actually revised its estimate saying that we would be losing GDP growth of around 0.3%. Now, as we have seen this pandemic spreading, the second wave leading to virus infections more in the region of around 3.5 to 4 lakh persons per day, we had to go back and revise these numbers because they looked a bit unrealistic. And as mentioned earlier in our presentation, based on the assumption that we'll be having these localized lockdowns right through the month of May, and probably it would only be in the month of June that there could be some sense of normalcy coming in. Our estimate was that we'll be losing overall around 1% growth in GDP. So instead of 11.2, we're really talking of 10.2. But we should just remember one thing, that this 10.2% also is nothing to cheer about, because it comes over a negative growth rate in the previous year of -8%. And if you actually juxtapose this GDP growth, which we are talking of in 21-22, with 19-20, the growth won't be more than around 1.5 to 2%. So it's nothing to be excited about, a double-digit number. In fact, our MD who's not here today, Ajay, he actually believes that growth could even go below 10%. It could be closer to 8%. So it all depends upon the kind of assumptions we're making about when these lockdowns will end and how severe they will be. But I think the government knows very well having a national-wide a lockdown is not feasible. And last year we saw that the government was not in a position to actually provide support. We had a plethora of policies which came through, which work in the medium to long run. But if you talk of the actual cash transfers, the employment generation programs, those were not really that adequate. If you look at what happened in the Western countries, there was cash transfers given to every individual. In US, you talk of it in UK, you talk of Germany. Now that was not the kind of stimulus which we provided. So therefore, I think at a national level, we have this kind of a constellation that the government is not going to have a national-wide lockdown. They're going to be more regional specific. But how deep they're going to be, well, we really don't know. I think today we're just living on hope that things are going to normalize by June. I'm not really quite sure because none of us are scientists, and I think even the scientists haven't gotten wrong. And as this number keeps changing, our GDP numbers will also be changing. But suffice to say today, I think the localized lockdowns do have an impact. Services sector have gotten impacted very seriously. Entertainment, hotels, restaurants, travel, anything to do with tourism, they have taken a major hit. Non-essential goods have gotten hit because we have said that we cannot trade in non-essential goods in certain geographies. Just think of this. I'm a textile manufacturer, maybe located in Gujarat. I can't send goods into Maharashtra because Maharashtra doesn't permit it. Some other state permits it. So production plans have gone topsy-turvy. So everybody's hoping that maybe for a month or so things will clear up, but we'll have to see. Maybe Sachin, you'll have to organize another webinar after a month or so where we'll be able to revise our estimates and probably talk in a more sensible manner about the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Madan, and I don't at all envy your position. You know, economists always having to peep into the future. It's not easy to kind of do that. But your points are very valid, Madan, and thanks for that. Finally we have Mr. Revankar, and thankfully we can see you as well. So a very warm welcome, Mr. Revankar. So I will pose a question to you only. So as we were discussing, a little while back, that during the Q4 of last year, it clearly seemed that we had overcome the pandemic, but now the world seems like a very different place. So for the CV financing industry, which also in some ways face challenges, as we understand, on the collections, etc., at least during the H1, how do you see the current year, especially on the growth and on the asset quality? And maybe if you can give some comparison with the last year, that will be great. Over to you, sir.
Can you unmute yourself, sir? Mr. Revankar, can you please unmute yourself?
Okay.
Yeah.
We can. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry for having some technical snag. I finally joined an iPad. I have to answer your questions. Last year and this year, I feel is a different perspective, because last year it was total lockdown. There was a stoppage of movement from village to village. Forget district to district. There was, so the 30 days last year was severe and nothing happened, nothing moved. But this year it is not like that. Things are moving. Now, whether all non-essentials are not moving, I don't agree, because things are moving. The cement is moving, steel is moving, the infrastructure activities, construction activities, they are happening. Maybe in some cities where there is a labor migration or temporary haltage, that is a challenge. But this movement has not stalled or stopped. There are some issues in maybe return load. I go to maybe Ahmedabad, return I don't get sufficient load, I may come empty, because then your calculation of revenue goes for a toss. But I feel it's a temporary issue. If these localized lockdowns gets regularized, I expect that to happen maybe by May 15th, because we have results on May 2nd, and post that, depending upon the control we have on the mob getting together, we should be able to see the peak and come down. And the vaccination drive should also help us, especially people who are going to the work. if they are getting vaccinated even one time, that is going to be major deterrent for virus to spread fast. And we should be back on the business by May 15th. So this temporary blip should not affect. And also May first week onwards, you have harvesting time, especially entire the wheat growing belt. And come what, there the business will start, activities will start, even though hinterland of Punjab and maybe Uttar Pradesh, we have challenges. But I think the rural areas have a way to get out of the challenge or this kind of hurdles and come back. So I feel this year the challenges would be much lesser than what it was last year. However, yes, the services industry will be hit strongly. Passenger movements will be hit strongly. For that to revive, it may take a couple of months. But for essential and even non-essential goods movement, I don't think there will be a big challenge. Essentials is moving, even non-essential. In fact, for testing, I was ordering something in Amazon. A week back, Amazon said this goods are not, what is non-essential? They said it's not available. We are not able to supply to you in your zone. But within a week, it has changed. That means they're able to move. So I'm just giving an example that I think people will not differentiate between essential and non-essential when the goods is moving. So I feel commercial vehicle industry, even though there will be some revenue challenges, they should be able to get back into the business very quickly.
Very valid, sir. Very valid. And how would you, if I were to ask a follow-on question in terms of asset quality or other collection efficiency, do you think that will be kind of, say, and if we talk about the more immediate term, say first quarter, and I'm not specifically asking for Shriram Transport because, you know, here we discuss more of the industry and not really individual companies. What is your sense, you know, for CV? Would that, are we looking at weaker numbers for collection efficiency in the current quarter?
I expect the April collection and to some extent May collection to be little lesser than normal, but that should not affect the quarter result. There could be, yes, a number of slippage in the sense of 1 month not paying. See, this all of the customers, NBFC cater to these self-employed or small businesses which operate, run the business and pay. And in this time, typically people will try to hold some cash because when they come back to the business, they need cash. So therefore, there could be some delay in payment, but that may not really get into a NPA kind of a situation. And meanwhile, there could be some support coming.
Got it, sir. Got it. I think that's helpful. I would like to now bring in Mr. Uday Kumar, sir. So while I think we have generally people are saying, on the panel and even otherwise, that maybe it's a month or a two kind of a concern, and then the world kind of will become a better place. One thing which kind of affects across NBFC and a big success factor is the access to funding and the reasonable cost and access. Now, considering that MFIs we saw, while you said that maybe the credit cost will be relatively lower than what CARE's presentation showed, but the fact is that it's relatively within the NBFC space a little riskier kind of in terms of the collection, etc. As mostly people are self-employed and lower on the economic levels. So do you foresee any tightening in the debt funding or any major risk aversion coming from the banks, NBFC, for the MFI sector?
Sachin, I agree that there's little higher credit cost for microfinance because it's completely unsecured loan. Okay, completely unsecured loan. Okay, but as per our understanding, most of the MFIs who are at least the medium and larger one have had sufficient cash. They are all holding good amount of liquidity, as well as the banks also quite liberal in giving funding to MFIs, being the third sector lending. So obviously there should not be any funding constraint. There could be some constraint for a small MFIs which are predominantly dependent on NBFCs. So because based on rating or based on their own grading system, sometimes their dependencies only to NBFCs for a private land borrowing. Those might be facing little challenge with cost also, but otherwise, by and large, 95% of industry should not face any challenge in terms of funding. They're all well funded and well capitalized also.
Okay, got it. I'd like to get in Mr. Tripathi here, sir. While affordable housing is a growing kind of a segment, but even within affordable housing, because most of the people are self-employed, and they also are a little higher on the kind of impact in terms of the collection efficiency or delinquencies, whichever we may say. So now, what is your outlook? I mean, you were quite candid in admitting that the disbursements have been affected in the month of April. How has been the collection experience? And I'm repeating, I'm not necessarily talking about Aadhaar, but in general, what's your observation in terms of affordable housing? How do you see collection efficiencies kind of panning out, maybe for the current quarter?
Sachin, that collection efficiency, if you see across the housing finance industry and what Umesh sir has just told, the collection efficiency saw a good improvement in the month of February, March. I tell you, in month of March, the bouncing, which peaked in last year, September, October, and gradually started coming down. In March 2021, the bouncing, or you can say collection efficiency through the banking collection, was more or less equal to what we had in February 20. It means we traveled after the pandemic, moratorium, restructuring, we reached the reasonably good level of collection efficiency. And we were so hopeful that collection efficiency, that is a barometer. Once the banking bouncing remains at the normal level, then our collection effort for remaining bouncing you can do very conveniently. In the month of April, we saw only across, I think I checked with many companies, it was 1.52% bouncing has increased. If the bouncing used to be in affordable housing ranging from 15% to 18%, depending on the segment you are in, but I'm not talking about the main housing finance company, for them bouncing maybe 7% only, but for affordable housing, depending on self-employed, informal, elite segment, it used to be ranging from 13, 14 to even 17, 18%. That increased 2% across the board, which I think there is a paper news also from NPCI that the bouncing has slightly gone up. We were hopeful that correction will happen. So I do agree with Revankar that entire country is not locked down, but when the fear factor is there, the employees who are engaged in collection, they are finding it difficult to move out. They may be either COVID positive, they are not, their family members are COVID positive. So even if my 10% people are COVID positive, taking their family members, 25-30% people are not in a position to move out. Even then, even the lockdown in that location is not there. What I am observing that this month, in month of April, those accounts which are in bucket P, NPA by June may not go up, but those accounts in bucket P, they will definitely move to NPA, because bucket P, if you are having roughly about say 1% or 1.5%, so normally 98-99% collection efficiency used to happen for the companies, it will not go beyond 90%. So if it will not go beyond 90%, in month of April, the NPA, which was very moderate in March 2021, it was slightly above March 20, but it was quite moderate in March 21, even after factoring Supreme Court judgment on 23rd March and pro forma NPA word is gone, the actual NPA is declared. The rise of NPA was not so much as of March NPA, March 21, when the results will come. The results have come, you have seen. April, definitely the NPA will go over March. Normal course, April, May, June will always is 25-30 basis point higher NPA because of the harvesting, marriage season and all that. It was a normal phenomena from last several years. But this year, because of the collection, people are unable to move out. Customer telling I have money, but most of the affordable housing customers, they are not paying through payment channels like Razorpay or Axis Pay or Easy or Paytm. So those who are paying, they are paying. But since my people are not able to reach, I expect that overall it might increase 0.75 to 1% NPA over what we had in March 2021. But as the COVID impact will lower down, the recovery will improve, may not be in May, June, but by September it will improve because we have seen last year the good progress took place.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks for your detailed inputs. And now I would like to ask a question to Mr. Madan Sabnaves, and I'm sure everyone on the panel will like to hear the answer. Sir, what is your view on the interest rates? We've seen fairly benign interest rates in the last, at least a couple of years. What is your take, especially because the government looks at, being a more aggressive borrower and things like that? So if you can share your thoughts, Madan.
So actually, when you're talking of interest rates, conventionally, we were all looking to see what the RBI is likely to do. And we used to ask the question, will the RBI be lowering the repo rate or not? And that would be contingent on how the inflation numbers were placed. We've seen over the last 1 year, and also because of constant reiteration by the governor of RBI, that inflation will not be the sole factor which is going to drive the decision of interest rates. I think the sense we get is that even though inflation to our mind is going to remain in the region of 5.5 to 6% for this quarter, maybe for the entire year, average around 5.5%. It's not going to come less than 5%. But I don't think the RBI will be increasing interest rates. So therefore, I think the stance which the RBI has taken is that it's going to be an accommodative stance, and they have brought in some new measures such as the GSAP, which came in the last policy to ensure that there's a lot of liquidity in the market. This is where we see a bit of ambivalence between what the policy is and how the market behaves. So I think for here, I just draw your attention to the 10-year GSEC paper. I think the RBI has been trying its best to make sure that the 10-year GSEC yield goes below 6%. The market has been fairly intransigent, and we have seen a couple of auctions. We've seen even the OMOs where there was no response coming because the market feels that there's too much of government borrowing, too much of state as well as center. Maybe private sector demand for credit is also going to pick up. So therefore, the market feels the rates should be higher. But I think the way in which the RBI has played the game so far, and probably will do during the course of the year, we can really say with a bit of confidence that interest rates will remain stable. We may not really see your repo rate coming down, and banks will have to take a decision about how much they require the deposits, what kind of interest rates they have to pay. Some of the commercial banks, especially in the public sector domain, have already increased their deposit rates marginally. So that may also get translated marginally to the MCLR. But from policy perspective, no change in the repo rate, and there will be a lot of liquidity in the market to ensure that the GSEC yields remain stable. Actually, if you asked me this question in March, I would have said that the GSEC 10-year GSEC should go over 6.5%. But today, I think I'll be very guarded and say that 6 to 6.1% seems to be the range with a tendency to probably go down, but definitely not up.
Great. So I'm sure the co-panelists would kind of like to hear that. Benign interest rates is something which I'm sure all NBFCs will look forward to. Mr. Revankar, last year, if you see, one of the big, while it was quite a, as someone said, a black swan kind of an event, and everyone kind of got affected, and businesses and all that. But somewhere the government and RBI, they came out with a fair bit of actions, and something like, say, moratorium, which at least on the liability side was good for you. It may not have been good for you on the asset side. But yes, overall level of defaults in the overall economy were significantly curtailed, because of those 6-month kind of a moratorium which everyone got. And again, I think to large extent for NBFCs also, things like TLTRO, etc., were there to kind of provide liquidity for NBFCs. Now in the current year, when we are saying there is no national lockdown, I mean, one that, and we saw political statements also being made, in that sense, that there is no national lockdown, only states take. I mean, my fear is, and I'll share with you that if the things don't really pan out the way people are saying, maybe 2 weeks, maybe a month, and if it goes beyond that, would it really get into a tough situation if there is no government support, coming in forthcoming? And what's your thinking on that, sir? Because at the end of the day, for a finance company, if these things are not kind of provided in time, that could really have a big impact. So maybe I kind of got a little drawn out, but basically what I'm asking is, what kind of support do you expect from the government? Maybe if this pandemic were to be drawn out a little bit longer than what we are right now feeling.
Yeah, you're right. See, last year it was more of a shock in the sense nobody expected things to move in the direction it went, and also nobody expected government to totally lock down and unlock over the 6 months or 9 months. But this time around, it's all a temporary lockdown, and they have isolated the location. It's not that, no, it's a mass. They have location by location they have done. And I think government is well prepared now, even though number of cases are much higher. There is a much better preparation, even though we see in the some TV and all, some desperate situation. But I think business is moving, things are happening. And in this situation, if people are missing payment of 1 or 2 EMI or smaller EMI, if they're able to pay, that is a temporary liquidity issue for the customers, and that may impact a company's collection and to some extent liquidity. Now, what we do expect is government and RBI both to come to support the institutions and individual both. There are ways to do it. Moratorium may not be the way, because last time we had a moratorium and it had several challenges. So I think if you give liberty to the companies, NBFCs, to maybe one of the solution could be a restructuring. Then we can rework on the customer's cash flow and give him smaller EMI for smaller a brief time, then bigger EMI later. So we can readjust our books accordingly. So it should be both sides, from the funding side to the NBFC or MFI, and from MFI to the customer. So if it happens both way, I think this can be easily managed. I don't think this is a manageable situation, and the government or the RBI need not really take big steps. It's a temporary liquidity support if they give in the adjustment of accounts, and also to some extent giving providing higher liquidity to the institutions and companies. We should be able to easily manage. That's what it looks like. We are not really much worried about it. Industry as a whole, we feel that we can easily manage, and the way government and RBI supported last time, we are sure that they will understand and come to support.
Got it, sir. I think very valid points you made. I think I'm seeing some the confidence in your this thing, that it's not really such a big concern, because maybe the business remains largely on its course. And secondly, I think your point on allowing or rather giving the flexibility to the NBFC per se to do restructuring of the loans, I think instead of doing some blanket things which was done last time. I think that's a point well understood. So great. So we have kind of a fair bit of audience as well here. I would rather now use some of the time that we have left to really get questions from our audience. So I mean, great for all the question responses that you gave. I can see a large number of questions already on my screen. Mridul, maybe you can make an announcement, and then I'll go for the Q&A session.
Sure, sir. Dear participants, now we can begin our Q&A session. You're please requested to key in whatever queries you have in the slot provided. It would be in your panel, please. Thank you.
Okay, so I will, while more questions come in, but there are already a few on my screen. So first question is actually kind of directed to Mr. Revankar. This is around the view on the current scrappage policy. Now that's the thing which can have some impact. So what's your thought on that? And do you see early replacement of vehicles by fleet operators, especially because I don't know, you can give a difference from a used vehicles versus new vehicles, etc. But how do you think this panning out for the industry and for the CV industry, and therefore for the CV financing as well?
The scrappage is something which has been in the discussion for more than 2-3 years. It is not a surprise. So industry and people who are part of the industry, including individuals, they're aware that something is going to come. So already people have made up a mind that they need to retire older vehicles. So a certain portion of older vehicle will go. It will be, to our estimation is that it should be around 10 lakh vehicle will retire. Now it is by March 22, government said they will do all their vehicles, they will retire all their vehicles. First, government has taken that step. Second, for others, there's no clarity, because it looks as if it's a voluntary right now, and it is not compulsory. So if it is a voluntary, those older vehicle can still fly if it meets certain standards or certain requirement, or maybe with higher fee or higher green tax kind of a fee. So if the vehicles which are efficient, if it can earn, then people can still pay little higher tax and run it. Otherwise, that vehicle will be scrapped. Now, what happens when the vehicle scrap? Every commercial vehicle, when it's scrapped, it has a certain value. So, because there is a steel in it, today the steel price has gone up by 2 times over the last 1 year. So, scrappage of a vehicle is not a loss to any individual. If there is a small additional incentive, then he makes good of the vehicle. So, I feel scrappage is actually advantageous for the people who really wanted to retire their vehicle or sell their vehicle or scrap their vehicle, and they buy new vehicle. Now what happens is, people who sell 15 plus vehicle, year old vehicle, they don't buy new vehicle, they buy 5 years old vehicle or 7 years old vehicle, because for their application, now if I'm carrying a sand or if I'm carrying a brick with a 18 years old vehicle, I will replace it with 7 or 8 years old vehicle. I will not buy a new vehicle. New vehicle is not suitable for or not really required for a short distance transportation. So it goes by the application. So definitely there will be a demand that will come for a new vehicle, but not immediately. It will come after maybe 2 years. So number of vehicles on the road will come down to some extent, and it gets replaced over the period. So the impact is not immediately on the new vehicle sales, but it will be more of some of the vehicle going out of the road and creating a demand for used vehicle. So I feel it is the proper policy is not come. We are not sure the proper shape of the policy. But what is going to happen is, if it is voluntary, then the impact will be over the period. If it's compulsory, then government has to shell out something to take care of the interest of the people who are owning that vehicle. But even then, people are not really worse off, because the steel price has gone up, scrappage value being good, people will get a good price for the vehicle.
Good. Great, sir. I think very interesting point you made, that unless it is clearly firmed and there is some kind of a carrot or a stick approach, no one will really sell their old vehicles. But interesting point that you made was that if indeed it was, say, made in some ways not so voluntary, and there was some kind of a diktat, in that case, used truck financing, that it should be positive for them, because if someone, as you said, selling 15-year, 17-year-old truck, buying a 7 or 8-year-old truck, so that has a residual life of 7 years, then they will then come into the used truck financing market, and that could be a growth driver. Do you see that happening for the used truck financing? I mean, maybe not immediately, but maybe once the clarity emerges on policy, maybe a year or two down the line.
No, used vehicle, yes. Used vehicle financing is almost a evergreen business. So there is always a business. And here, as you rightly put it, there will be higher demand for used vehicle financing, because the ticket size, if it is 15 years old vehicle, the ticket size would have been 3 lakhs or 2 lakh. Now the ticket size will be 7 or 8 lakhs. Automatically the volume goes up and the demand for used vehicle goes up.
Correct. Great. That's helpful, sir. My next question, which I have got from one of the audience, is to Mr. Uday Kumar, and basically the question is around the poll-bound states. Did you see a significant impact, in states like Assam and West Bengal on your MFI? Not for you MFI, but I would say more for an industry level. Is that something that kind of affected the collections in the current year, or rather the last 2 months or so?
No, actually, the poll is happening regularly around the clock. Every year one or other state gets its poll, but actually, the collection will not impact because of poll. No election impact collection. There was some impact in the Assam or Bengal. Nothing to do with the election. Actually, it was prior to the COVID, and then the COVID. There are some other political reasons or social reasons there which impacted. But poll was there in Tamil Nadu, poll was there in Kerala, so we didn't have any issue. No MFI struggled because of election. Of course, sometime during poll, because of code of conduct, because you can't gather the people much. That is why there may be a kind of muted growth in those periods of code of conduct time, but normally it won't affect the collection.
Got it. So that's good. Now, my next question is to Mr. Tripathi, sir. The question is that, I mean, this is something you have responded, but maybe I'll still ask again. The self-employed and the cash salaried group seem to have been affected largely during the pandemic, and this time it was quite sudden, and it has affected people who have managed to cope up during the first time. So how affordable HFC should approach customers on this point?
That's true. The last time, if you see the moratorium percentage, out of the entire moratorium of a company, I think 70-75% moratorium was taken by the self-employed informal segment and cash salary, and 20-25% was taken by the formal salary segment. It is true. But this segment of formal and informal segment in a low-income housing or low-income segment, it has a very fast resilience to come back to the business. They don't take too much of time. If lockdown, like Revankar Saab has told, if lockdown is not there, they're able to work. But today, of course, since various states, various cities are, they have said no movement is allowed, the shop is closed. The moment they are allowed to open the shop, they will come back to that. But this segment, of course, if their 3-4 installment becomes overdue, for them it is difficult to arrange money for entire 3-4 installment. This segment is very good in terms of repayment and in terms of honesty, but the only problem, and they are very resilient, the only problem that volatility of income and their ability to arrange the more than 2-3 installment is become a challenge. That's why sometimes they become default. But I believe that I have seen in the February, March, if I compare with the formal salary other, the difference was not much. So again, this time 1 or 2 months will be impacted, but situation will improve. I take 1 minute to what Revankar Saab has told about the RBI action, what should be there. Moratorium is of course not a solution, but what I personally see in commoditization time, the Reserve Bank of India did a wonderful thing that they allowed forbearance of 3 months installment. They said December 16 to March 17 installment will not be required, and there will be time was extended, and then the normal course of the installment become falling due. So in the 3-4 months, they will postpone like declaration of NPA from 3 months to go 5-6 months time. Probably that situation will help the self-employed segment. This segment is vulnerable, but have resilience to come back.
Okay. So that's very helpful. Other question, I mean, we have more of a general question that, I mean, any of you who feel we can take it, is around digital payments. All of you, I mean, the big part of the business is collecting money, and there has been a significant increase, I would say, in general public, resorting to online shopping and generally getting more and more comfortable with the digital payments, etc. So are we seeing a big trend, in terms of, and maybe that will have a impact on your cost as well, instead of sending people to kind of collect money from their houses, or they coming to the branches, etc. The digital payments could be a big kind of a game changer here. What's your initial sense? I mean, we've seen it from the last lockdown till the current situation.
I will take, then my other colleagues will take. I have seen good traction in that. In fact, honestly, I'm telling you, Earlier, digital payment was never tried, but during last time lockdown, we started having tie-up with all various payment channels, and we have now 5-6 on our kitty, and we are educating customers. I am seeing my 10% cash collection has moved to digital payment, and I look forward the next 1 year it will move to 25%. Even in the lower income segment, if you educate them, the payment through digital mode is getting traction and increasing, which will definitely be a big game changer for all of us.
Great. Mr. Revankar or Mr. Uday Kumar, any thoughts?
I too agree. It will actually increase over a period of time, but I'm not sure the collection efficiency will change because of digital payment. It's only a temporary. So money should be there with the customer to pay the money, right? So it won't change. If the money is there, intention is there, money will come tomorrow. Not necessarily because of digital, I will get today, tomorrow it won't come. But it will change the behavior, of course. It may change some extent the cost. But in microfinance, I'm still not in favor of collecting only through digital. So it's a more of a high touch and high tech business eventually. It cannot be only tech. It has to be high touch plus high tech. If it's only high touch, then this whole connecting with the customers, meeting them at their place, talking to them regularly, giving them money in a very small installment, and providing at that. These things are very much important for this kind of business. But high tech will enable you for a good data, speed of transaction, speed of whole movement of files and all, less papers. This will improve the efficiency of the company. But it both goes hand in hand, for at least for microfinance business.
Very true. Mr. Revankar, any additional points that you would like to make?
I agree with both of them. I think the digital is something in India, everyone has adopted to digital. Everyone has some wallet or other. That doesn't mean that people will rush to do all the transaction through digital, because it will take time. Many of our in India, the self-employed people, they have everything in cash, coming in cash, giving in cash. So they may not even have time to go and deposit into bank, then convert it into digital. See, that is a pain point. So to that extent, cash will remain.
Got it. So one last question, while we have multiple questions, but I will. Yeah, sorry, Madan. Yeah, please go ahead.
It is just from an economist perspective, it's not very tempting when you all are talking in terms of digital payments. But just for the information of the audience, the currency in circulation has actually increased in the last 1 year. So there's a lot of preference for cash. There's a lot of currency being created. So households still prefer currency. It may not be reflective of the payments being made to the NBFCs, but yes, there's a preference for currency. There's no substitution as well. Yeah, please carry on.
Got it. I will close it with this question, and which is again a kind of a theme running through many questions that I've seen here. Basically the concern is, that there was a stress event which happened last year, and then maybe you gave some kind of a leeway. The collections kind of came back. Some people may not have still paid. The moratorium was there and all that. And then on the back of that, within 3 to 6 months, we have the next event. The concern is, could we see significant jump up in the NPA numbers? Because in NPAs allow you to kind of have 3 months or so before you kind of acknowledge it in the books, and therefore to the extent the moratorium was available, to the extent that the payments were delayed by some time but not too much, now that the second wave is happening, could that lead to a jump up in the NPA numbers and not only the delinquencies of DPD 30 and all that? So and that is kind of a relevant question to my mind to any NBFC and anyone who wishes to take that. I know we've been talking about asset quality in general throughout this thing, but I think this is a very specific point and kind of a common running theme.
Maybe
I will.
Yeah, Mr. Uday Kumar, you can please start.
Why I want to answer this quickly, because since it's just 6 months old, when the customers who want to take the advantage of not paying have already taken. You already probably is a delinquent already. So others who wanted to pay and stay back with the good credit history have tried and come back to normalcy. I don't think they want to go back to the delinquency situation. That is why I was telling that the delinquency or a NPA should not be equal to last time. Your 5% or 4% would have already defaulted and were in delinquent status, and balance one are paying, and they have gone through all this cycle and paying today, right? My strong sense that they will not go back to the same situation.
Got it. Got it. Mr. Tripathi?
I agree with Uday Kumar ji. Majorly, I agree with him. But one thing is that it depends that how long the this COVID situation gets subsided. This will, because people are willing to pay, but they want to keep money again with them. If the COVID situation goes away in next 2 months' time, then you will have a spike in NPA in the month of June quarter and September quarter. Then again, March 22, it will come down to equal to the March 21. That is what my feeling, my assessment is that. But if it prolongs, then probably 50, 75 basis point it may happen. But credit cost, if you take, it will not go much. It will go 1.5 to 1.5 to 1.75 times in the month of June, September. But for the year as a whole, it will be more or less 5-10 basis point over that what you have last year, not much of it.
Okay, Mr. Revanka, final your thoughts.
I agree with both Uday and Mr. Tripathi, because what happens is there could be a temporary delay, and maybe first quarter there can be a little increase in NPA stage 3, then automatically it will come back to the normalcy, because the pent-up business is too large to ignore. There is a huge demand in infrastructure, huge demand in real estate. There is a huge demand in consumer spending. Everything will make good very quickly. So India will bounce back much faster. So even if there is some delay for a month or two, that will not sustain, because the pent-up demand will take care of the business and the collection. So I don't really see a big risk of NPA.
Great. So thanks, thank you, Mr. Revanka, for this. And on that optimistic note, while I think everyone is aware and kind of clearly clarifying their comments that if this were to be there for a month, if this was to be there for 2 months, all of us are hoping that this situation will improve from the current point. In general, the key messages that I'm taking back is, one, that the economy and the businesses have not been as adversely impacted as last year because of a lot of industries, construction, demand for cement, steel, that kind of continues to be strong. So say from a CV perspective, I got a sense that the underlying demand has not kind of subsided so much. Similarly, I got a sense from MFI as well that while yes, there could be an impact, but the credit cost in the current year, while CARE had projected almost near or slightly higher, but Mr. Uday Kumar feels that it will be actually lower this year. And again, I'm sure with the caveat that this thing will not go beyond a month or two. And Mr. Tripathi also, kind of shared with us the thoughts that the disbursements, while they have kind of come down in the month of April already, but he's quite hopeful that there will be a bounce back in the coming months, maybe after May. And so yes, Q1 could be impacted, but again, on the credit cost per se, he again seems to be quite optimistic that the impact will not be more than 10 basis point. So a very enriching conversation, I must say, very, very valid points that all our panelists shared with us. And on top of that, how can I forget, Madan also, our chief economist, is kind of giving a sense even that the interest rates will not kind of go up. And largely because of maybe a little bit of a slowdown that we are seeing right now, and the liquidity which kind of continues to be in the system. So on that note, I would like to bring it to a close. Many thanks to our panelists, but anyways, I will hand it over to Mridul, who will kind of close the ceremony for us. Mridul, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sachin sir. Mr. Madan Sabnabis, thank you. And again, thank you to our guest speakers. It was a privilege to host you and hear your views. And to all the participants for taking a time out and being a part of this CARE Ratings webinar. For any further feedback, queries, suggestions, you are most welcome to write us in the feedback box, which will be coming no sooner the webinar ends. Thank you and goodbye for now.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all. Thank you.